will be my last AGM, and I want to spend a little bit of time before we hand over to the formal business, just reflecting on how things have changed. I've been with the Trust 9 years. That's the maximum that chairs are supposed to serve. And I still feel that there are things undone and things that I would like to carry on doing. But things have changed so much. All through that time, the lead governor and I have gone along to induction sessions with new staff, and we've done a little double act, and we got very used to the things that we were saying. And I always used to say mental health is a Cinderella service. It's last in line when they're dishing out the funds. It's not something that gets talked about. If you go to a national conference, you probably see a line of people standing up demanding to know why mental health wasn't on the agenda. And that doesn't happen now. Now we have a very much more central role, and that is acknowledged, and the importance of mental health for the nation's well-being and for individuals' well-being is well acknowledged. So this year, when all of the preparations for COVID-19 began to be considered, actually the fact that there would be mental health implications and the fact that we would need to think about the impact on people's mental health was recognised from the start, not just about the impact on patients, but impact on staff having to deal with these traumatic situations. And we were centrally involved, not only in the local preparation, but also thinking nationally about the needs that people would have and the psychological support that would be necessary for staff and for patients. This year, if you turn on to watch the Premier League, you have to turn on to watch the Premier League because you can't get along to a match. You will hear the commentators talking about every mind matters. You will hear well-known figures talking about their own issues, and we're a long way from the days when someone came home from a cricket world tour and was vilified by the press because he had had a mental health problem. And this year, there is a guaranteed mental health investment standard that all areas are being asked to meet. And we are being told that that will be held to, even though the NHS funding has gone in such a strange direction because of the money that has had to be ploughed in for COVID-19. And we are grateful for that, although it will only begin to address the difficulties and the shortfall that we've had over the years. But I am hopeful that mental health services will get the attention that they deserve in years to come, and that we will continue to be accepted and regarded as an absolutely key partner in our system and in the nation in delivering our services and meeting the needs of the people who use them. I would like to take the opportunity, since it is my last AGM, of just paying my thanks to all those I've worked with. There have not been a lot of changes to the board because we have been a very stable organisation, and people come and they stay for a long time, which is really good. But the support of my board colleagues has been absolutely wonderful all through that time, and was of particular vital importance to me last year when I suffered a very tragic bereavement when my son took his own life. And I have to say that had it not been for the support of this organisation and my colleagues on the board and my governors, I might not have been here myself today. And therefore that just pays tribute to the work that this organisation does. And I'd like to thank them all for that and wish them all the best as they move ahead and my successor takes on the reins. Now, I have one or two constitutional matters to arise. I'm not sure we're now on I can't see the slide from here, I believe we are. During the course of the year, the governors have looked at the constitution of the trust and asked itself the question whether the current governing body was absolutely right for the current situation that we find ourselves in. And we worked with the governors to think about the constitutions and the boundaries of the elected governors that we have representing the public, representing service users and carers. And we have recommended, and the governors have agreed, some changes that will mean that rather than having public governors, service user governors who represent the whole of Birmingham, there will now be 3 constituencies within Birmingham. And rather than having carer governors who represent the whole of our patch, they too will represent constituencies within the system. So we have now added a 3rd service user for Birmingham, which means that there will be 3 in Birmingham, 1 in Solihull, and that pattern will be there for both service users, carers, and the public. And we've removed the service user for the rest of England, but divided the rest of England so that there is still representation for those of our members who live outside the Birmingham and Solihull boundaries, because there are many of you, and of course our services go beyond that point. We had difficulties filling that post, and it hasn't had anyone in it, I think, for 3 years now. So the overall changes will create an additional carer governor, and the commissioner governor post will be removed, as we haven't had an appointment, but that means that the overall number of governors will remain the same at 21. And we'll show you what those boundaries and what those constituencies look like. Someone can change the slide to show the chart. And the useful thing about the changes that we have made is that these boundaries align with the boundaries that are used by our colleagues in Birmingham Community Trust. And we very much hope that the links we are building with them at board level will be replicated at governor level. I know there have been discussions between our current 2 lead governors, and that means that the governors in those patches will be able to work together and think with their boards and with the local people about the whole of the needs in those areas. So we have elections coming up in this trust, and all of those posts that you can see on the screen will be up for election. So as members of our trust, we do hope that perhaps you'll think about standing for election in one of those categories, in one of those constituencies, and give us a full board, a full council of governors for the board to work with in the new year. Thank you. I'm going to hand over now to Roisin Williams, our Chief Executive, to give us an overview of the last year, and she will touch on the last 6 months as well, although they're not strictly covered. It would be impossible to hold this AGM and not think about how the pandemic has impacted on us. Yeah. Roisin.
Thank you, Sue. Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome from myself as well. Just wanted to remind us all, actually, that I think, you know, on our day-to-day business, it's quite sometimes difficult to remember that we're part of something very big here at Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Foundation Trust. So we operate out of over 40 sites. People will be aware that we have many teams. We have 700 inpatient beds, and we serve a population of over 1.3 million people. And we do so with over 4,000 staff. So there are over 4,000 of us that make up the team here. During the year that we're talking about, just to remind people, that give some headlines. We provided more than care to more than 71,000 service users. 2,600 of those were in our inpatient settings, but 2,500 people received support from our integrated addiction service in Solihull, and nearly 20,000 people received care and intervention from Birmingham Healthy Mind service that we run. So a lot that goes on a day-to-day basis. But what I want to talk a little bit about is not just the things that we do every day, but some of our achievements, some of the developments that have happened during the year that we're talking about. If I could have the next slide, thank you. So just a few here in terms of highlights for us. So the next slide, please. So our Solihull Integrated Addiction Service took on a new look during this year. We looked at reducing our out-of-area placements, and we had a significant amount of work undertaken around that to make sure that the majority of people who needed care from us in an inpatient setting had so in Birmingham and Solihull itself and not elsewhere. We were the first mental health trust to receive accreditation for stage 5 from the HIMSS organisation, and this is around our work that we've done around an integrated and electronic patient care record, and we're the only mental health trust to have achieved that level of accreditation. So that really is a partnership between clinical leaders, clinical staff, and our expertise in IT that we've got in the organisation. There was the launch of the new Frailty Family and Carer Strategy during this period of time, and we thought differently about how we wanted to engage with each other across the organisation, and we developed a crowdsourcing approach to doing that. And we also received Veterans Awareness accreditation during this period as well. Alongside that, we continued to meet standards that were set for us. So, for example, we continued to meet the standard around waiting time, and many instances we exceeded it. We also exceeded and maintained the national standard for 3-day follow-up, and our compliance levels are very much above the average in that. And that's really important about keeping everybody safe. So making sure that that follow-up care means that actually people are kept safe once they've received services from us in our inpatient areas. During this year, we also saw colleagues, Kathy Chacho and Dr. James Reed, nominated and shortlisted for a parliamentary award. We saw Steve Gilbert receive an OBE. We saw Latvia, Relen receive a Senior Champion of the Year award. And we had 2 major research grants awarded to us. Many of us are involved in research in the organisation, and during this year 73 people had their publications produced in peer journals during that time. I wanted also to talk a little bit about the experience, a research group that has been set up for us, which is around intertwining and making sure that the experience of individuals is intertwined in our research as well, so that we're not just looking at this from an academic and a clinical perspective, but that we're also looking at it from the point of view of people who have experiences of mental ill health, and so that research is really a joint initiative from everybody. Could I have the next slide, please? So in addition to the partnerships that we undertake with colleagues within the organisation, with service users and with carers, we also have very formal partnerships, and those have really gone from strength to strength during this year. So our merit partnership with other mental health trusts, we've got a significant amount of work undertaking with them. During the year that we're talking about, we undertook to look at how we could think about providing services across all of the West Midlands on behalf of all of the mental health services, and people may well be aware that we do that for Reach Out. One of our colleague trusts does that for eating disorder services, and our neighbouring trust does it for child and adolescent mental health services as well. We've got a number of West Midlands provider collaboratives, not least the Veterans Collaborative. We've also got continue to do work with the Mental Health Through Sport, and really thinking about how we leverage that work with the Commonwealth Games coming up. So a lot of activity happening within that partnership. And of course, we've got our Birmingham and Solihull Sustainability and Transformation Partnership, whereby all of the organisations, including the ambulance service in Birmingham and Solihull, work together to think about how can we provide better opportunity by working together for the population that we need to serve and that are here and need us to be here for them. In terms of engaging with our service users, our carers and our community, I'm really delighted to say that the Expert by Experience work and the Recovery College under Catherine's leadership has really gone from strength to strength. We've got many more people wanting to get involved. We've got 68 people currently registered as individuals who want to work with us, who have experiences of mental ill health and have expertise that they want to impart for us. We've got the work that Beresford does through Unity FM, where thousands of people on a weekly basis get involved in how we're shaping up and thinking about how we stay well from a mental health point of view. And obviously we get involved in a number of other things. The Bedlam Festival, which is hugely successful. I know Sue is something that you've been really passionate about, as do others in the organisation. And we've got in our community engagement team a really kind of small resource that has a big impact. So the ability for them to create a number of engagement days with our communities that involve, again, thousands of people. I just wanted to also talk a little bit about the Recovery College. So whilst during this year there were a number of activities that were undertaken, there were about 1,500, so 1,500 places available for Recovery College activities, and over 80% of them were taken up. So over 1,000 people engaged in thinking about what does good look like in terms of staying well, and in terms of supporting people in our community to think positively about mental health. But there are, of course, opportunities for that to grow. So the Recovery College is in fact open to all of us. So whether we're a member of the team here at Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Trust, or whether we're an individual in the community. So I would encourage all of us to think about engaging in the work of the Recovery College and gaining expertise and opportunity alongside those other 1,500 people that did during this year. So let's see if we can do better by that going forward, although that's a huge number indeed of people that engaged in that. Engagement with our staff, we know from our staff survey that this is a really important area for focus. We recognise that it's an area that we need to do a lot more around. And we've been thinking about what are the different ways we can do that. So Amanda Gatherer and her colleagues in our psychology teams have been thinking about compassionate care through Schwartz rounds. 11 of those were held during this period. We had over 100 health promotion sessions that people got involved in, and we launched our health and wellbeing guide. Our staff networks, so we have 3 staff networks that are really very active, really very passionate about wanting to support us in the organisation to do better by everybody. And they have gone to strength through this, supporting us in recruitment, in policy development and other things as well. So our quality improvement project is also a way of us ensuring that everybody has the opportunity to think about and influence change without having to go through long process and bureaucratic processes to get permission. So at the moment we've got 65 quality improvement projects that are happening across the organisation, and 322 staff have been trained thus far in quality improvement techniques. So that means that at any moment in time, all 300 people could be thinking about, actually, what do I know needs improving, and how do I get a group of people together using the training that I've had to think differently about the improving quality. From a quality improvement perspective more generally, it is really still at the centre of what we need to do. So from our point of view, continuous quality improvement as a board, providing safe, compassionate care is an absolute priority. And we've got lots of examples of where doing so in co-production has made a big difference. So if I think about our Mood and Track project, which is designed to increase referrals from CMHTs into the bipolar service, that wouldn't have been possible without experts by experience and service users supporting us to do that as well. The same with thinking about the family and carer pathway collaboration. Without the collaboration and the input of carers, as well as patients, then we would not have been able to look at how did we increase engagement around that. And likewise, our sexual safety collaboration, where we're looking to make sure that everyone who comes into our services in an inpatient area feels safe from sexual harassment or harm. And we wouldn't have been able to put in place the way of working that we have without the really thoughtful interventions and input from people who've had experiences, some of them not so great, in our inpatient units. So really helping us to improve on a day-to-day basis. In terms of the number of programmes that we've got going on, so just to give you, sorry, the slide before, if you don't mind. So in acute and urgent care, we've currently got 14 quality improvement projects happening, including one around the, reducing the use of PRN. That's medication that is given from time to time rather than being prescribed on a general basis. We've got 11 in our integrated community and recovery service, and particularly wanted to highlight improving the call responses to the services. We know that this is something that has been a thematic sometimes in terms of some of the serious incidents that we've experienced. So a project there to look at how can we improve upon that and therefore keep people safer. In our secure care and offender health, we've got 8 live projects, including looking at the quality of risk assessments. Taking risk and enabling risk in those services is really important to people's recovery, and so being able to do that by having really good quality risk assessments to underpin them is really quite important. In our specialties, we've got 13 live projects at the moment, including improving waiting times for appointments. And it's really important, isn't it, that when we need to see somebody, when we've decided and made a decision with other people that actually now is the time to make a referral to a service, to ask for help, that we're seen as quickly as possible. So a great project going on there. And within our professional support services, we've got 19 live projects across all of those, including looking at how we implement our duty of candour in a better way. So how do we make sure that when things haven't gone quite so well, that we're really honest, that we live that value of openness and honesty really quickly and in a way that lands well for people in terms of receiving that information. So of course we aren't without challenges, so it's not just all about our achievements, and we've got a number of challenges in the organisation, and I just wanted to pick out 3 really to talk about today. Our CQC inspection report of last time saw us receiving a requires improvement report, and a number of areas, including in safety and including in well-led actually. So a lot of effort has been expended over the last year to look at really honing in on what were the issues that arose and how can safety be improved. How can we lead in a better way than we are at the moment? And we had expected to have a follow-up inspection in April of this year, but of course, because of the circumstances we then found ourselves in, we haven't. But I just wanted to make clear to everybody, the fact that that inspection didn't happen has not meant that we haven't continued to pay attention to safety and quality in this organisation. In fact, during this period, staying safe, keeping safe has been an absolute priority. Equality, diversity and inclusion remains a real challenge, both in the context of those receiving care. How do we ensure that we're being culturally sensitive, that we're paying attention to the fact that there are differences of culture that sometimes mean that a restricted practice is more likely to be utilised, and how can we change that? How can we ensure that our practice over time takes account of wanting to do better in that area? And our staff survey also tells us that for many people with protected characteristics, that actually they feel less part of the organisation, and they feel more likely to be discriminated against or to experience harassment or bullying in the organisation. So bullying and harassment has been during this period a really strong theme that we've wanted to get underneath. Many of you came forward, many staff came forward and shared their experiences of bullying and harassment, or witnessing it, because actually it's as traumatic to witness it as it is to experience it oneself, is one of the things that we've very much learned during this period. So that these will be ongoing. Our challenges are things that we know we will continue to focus on an ongoing basis. So looking forward, we've been doing quite a lot of work around developing our strategy. I say quite a lot of work. We've had over 1,600 interactions from the 6 Expert by Experience workshops right through to the online challenges that we did through Your Voice, etc. we really were determined that the strategy for the next period would be co-produced, that we would be in a position to say that actually everybody was given an opportunity to take part, and having taken part, we then wanted to give people opportunity to also say, have we heard you right? Is what you've said and the sense we've tried to make of it as we go into the period of now looking to launch it, does this resonate with you in a way that tells you that we heard what you've had to say? So I just wanted to give some headlines. I don't want to give too much information because we're about to go into the launch of this, but I did think it was important for us to give some headlines. So in terms of our values, there was a sense from everybody that actually the values that we had were good, that they were really being supported to drive change in the organisation and to keep us balanced in the context of the way we wanted to operate. But there was a view that openness and honesty and dignity and respect could in fact be replaced by what people felt was a more important value to us going forward of inclusivity. And so going forward, our three values will be compassion, inclusivity and commitment. And the slide gives you a bit of detail about how that sits under there. But this is about what we need to do going forward, and how we need to concentrate. How do we need to embed these, make these everyday part of our language? So as a board, we talk a lot about our values right now, and as a board going forward, we will continue to use these values to be the cornerstone of everything that we do. In terms of our vision, there was a view that the vision should remain, that it still remains something that we were aiming to achieve. Sue has talked a lot, I think, about how she's seen things change over 9 years, but there's still a long way to go. But there was a sense that people would like it shortened so that it could be easier to remember, and therefore for us to embed in a better way. So we've retained improving mental health as our overall vision, and we think that there are 4 key ways that we need to work in order to achieve this vision. So one around driving change. Again, Sue's talked a lot about the change she's seen in 9 years, but we also know that for most of us listening, that there's more change that we know we need to drive through to enable this. That working together, having a real sense of team, a real sense of inclusion is really important. That continuous improvement, so really building on that journey that we've started around quality improvement, it will absolutely be a way of working that could help drive us to achieve this vision. And it can't be achieved without thinking about the reduction of inequalities, and how do we really pay attention to that, and what are the different things that we might do in going forward. As Sue said, we can't have our AGM, despite the fact it's a looking backwards, without acknowledging that towards the end of the year that we're talking about, we found ourselves in a place that none of us could have ever imagined through the COVID pandemic. Our partnership working really came to the fore. So our partnership with you, with those of you that are our patients and our service users, your respect for what we were asking you to do, even if it felt that it was creating an anxiety or a vulnerability for you at that period of time. Can't thank you enough for supporting us to be seen virtually, to enable us to check up on you by telephone rather than seeing you by face to face. To ask you when you're in an inpatient unit to not receive visitors at a time when you were clearly quite anxious. We were all anxious, and to support us in that has been just amazing. And those of you on the team to have gone, many miles above and beyond what we've asked you to do throughout the period, it's just been brilliant, And we've managed to keep everybody as safe as we possibly could. And I think we continue to want to do that, and that continues to be our absolute priority going forward. But thank you so much to everybody that worked with us and continues to work with us during very, very difficult and challenging times. So my final slide is about saying thank you, and I can't not say thank you to Sue. You've reflected with us about your 9 years, but it's an opportunity for me to take a couple of moments to also say thank you to you. So you said that you didn't have many changes in the board, but actually you've overseen 4 chief execs, 3 substantive, 1 interim.
Yes,
3 substantive,
if you
1
can,
interim.
Paul, yes.
3 substantive, 1 interim. And you know, not just that, but I mean, really shaped the board to really, you know. So when I joined the organisation, it was quite clear that actually patients and carers at the heart of what we do was very, very apparent. The fact that every board was starting with a patient or a staff story, and that was your passion, and you would be very, very unhappy. Why isn't there a story if we couldn't have our story there? Because it was so important to you, I think, you know, your values, you know, the fact that you lived the 4 values of the organisation, that you're striving to be open and honest, even if that got you into trouble. You were absolutely clear about wanting to continue to be absolutely clear about that. The respect that you show everybody, even when they're challenging you and giving you a difficult time. You still always operate with absolute respect for everybody. Your compassion, the fact that you were able to share today some very difficult circumstances that you've gone through yourself. I think shows your level of compassion that you carry every single day, that other people still matter, and that you're using that to drive your passion about mental health, and therefore shows your real commitment, absolute commitment. So I think those 4 values that you helped to set as an organisation, you've absolutely lived while you've been here. I mean, above and beyond that, you're the ultimate professional. You know, so you know, you don't engage in undermining people, in gossip, any of those things that I think sometimes in public office people do. And I think that you've been ultimately professional. I think you've been provocative at times, and I think that you know, that you have pushed and challenged and poked some of our colleagues. And that, you know, I think your point about mental health being, you know, when you started this role, being in the wings and coming forward, but it's not least because of the fact that you provoked people, you made people recognise the need to do some of that. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think you've shown challenge. You know, you've challenged yourself at times too, and you've been hugely committed to, you know. I think of your sense of family, your sense of community, your sense of Christianity is always kind of evident to us, I think, in terms of, so you've been an inspiration to others from that context. So in talking to others about, people have said that, you know, you've been really inspirational to them because of those, that sense of those things that you give. You've been a really great custodian. Because, you know, when we're in these services, in these jobs, that's what we are, aren't we? We're a custodian of either the organisation or indeed the services until such time as it's someone else's time. So you've been an absolutely great custodian. You've been a fantastic advocate for mental health, and we know that that will continue. So thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you, Rishin. Thank you.
And I'll pass to Dave.
Okay, thanks, Rishin. I would echo that. I can't do it as eloquently as that, and I wouldn't try, but I think this is a family. And you've been the mother of that family over a long period of time and seen us do a lot of things. And people have already said the last 2 years, last year, a lot's happened. I think for me as well, a lot's happened over the last year. So I celebrated my first wedding anniversary week before last, and when I reminded the lovely Adele that it was paper, and a copy of the Daily Mirror was in the post, she reminded me, I'm not going to reach my golden wedding anniversary. She said they're going to be gold. So I'm going to talk about more boring matters than necessary. So going through this, and go to the next slide, please. So, question, why do we need to perform well financially? And the answer is, it allows us to do other things. It can't be an end in itself. But good financial performance is then control of your money. Means it assures regulators, keeps us in control, allows us to do things. Means really importantly, we've got the cash to pay our staff. People talk about them as being the greatest asset, and they represent 1/3 of the money that we spend. So apart from buildings, That's the only other significant we've got. We are our people. It's important we value them and do all manner of things as well as just pay them. But really importantly, it gives us the room to invest in building services and other things and allows us to concentrate on quality. If we're not controlling money, we're not able to do this, so other people will tell us what to do. That's the real issue for us here. So how do we do in the year that we've just finished? So normally I'd be talking about a surplus or at least break even. The last year has been really challenging. We knew at the start of the year, given the requirement for savings which are substantial, which relate to things that we haven't been able to do in previous years, we had a significant challenge. We flagged up really early in the year to the regulators that we thought there was going to be an issue delivering the target, which was basically a break even of 150,000 deficit. We worked with NHSI during the year on doing that, demonstrating the governance that we've got in place, demonstrating the improvement patterns that we've got and what we intended to do, and looking forward. We ended the year in a lot better position than we could have been at one stage. So we ended with a nearly 5 million deficit, which is a big number, but it could have been a lot worse, and we are in control of this. It's fair to say that COVID has changed things. I'll talk about that shortly. In addition to that, if you look at the annual accounts and why we're due, there's a technical loss of nearly £2 million, and that relates to a change in the value of the buildings and lands that we own. So it's irrelevant in real terms. It's something that has to go through technically in the books. In terms of cash, ended the year with £40 million and spent during the year £7.5 million on developing buildings, developing systems and other things. And we continue to invest in the buildings that we've got. Clearly COVID makes a real difference. So we're a lot less dependent on buildings than we were in the future. That gives us an opportunity, and we do need to look at it. We need to work out how we use the capital we've got wisely, and how we use the buildings we've got wisely. And just do the next slide, please. So I'm not going to labour on this, but the single oversight framework is what others use to assess how well we're doing, to look at the risk that arises and that we're subject to. So we would review this, but it's not the real driver. Now, very much more, it's about how we spend and get value for money around that. So I showed that for what it's worth in terms of the overall position. So we'll just move on. So a question that's often asked is, if we're performing well, why do we have to keep on making savings every year? So I'm going to repeat what I went through last year in terms of what this looks like to a normal person. So often we use terms like recurrent and non-recurrent and things like that, and CIP, etc. We need not a lot to a lot of people. So trying to put it in the context of people I'm talking to. So if I talk about Tom, we can go on to the next slide, please. So Tom is a nurse who works at his local hospital. This is a guy from D-side, rather from around here, but it could be anybody. Okay, so Tom, he takes home on a monthly basis £2,000, that's after tax and everything. He's got a number of expenditures against that, so he pays his rent, pays his council tax, utilities, TV and internet, particularly important internet now when he's working from home, but going through, he pays £400 on that. He's paying back a bank loan of £250, etc. He's got to be able to get to work, or he used to be able to have to get to work and pay for food. So he spends during the month normally 1,900. That means he's got 100 spare each month. That's what we would call surplus in the NHS or organisations. So we go on to the next slide. So the way Tom manages his finance, he plans to put away that spare £100 each month. So he's building up a sum that he can use. Clearly he needs to dip in for one-off expenses like holidays, etc. But he plans generally to put away that £100 each month, his surplus. He already has £1,000 in the bank, lucky Tom, for unforeseen expenses. And that we would call in the NHS or organisations reserves, sums we've got for a rainy day. He's just heard, again looking Tom, he's getting a £50 pay rise. Might be Boris just coming through doing another thing about furloughing, but he's getting a £50 pay rise. That we'd call the annual uplift. So we do get things around that. However, against that, landlord, nasty landlord, putting up the rent by £50 a month. He's got travel because he's got to go outside, and he's got the cost of getting through Birmingham now, as the Clean Air Zone when it comes in. Another £30, and his utilities bill has also gone up by £50. Those we call cost pressures in the NHS. So if you add that up versus the increase he's got, it'll be worse off by £80 each month. That is what we term as being the financial gap, what we need to do something about. Can we just go on to the next slide, please? So, how can Tom stay within his budget? So he has to find a way to reduce his outgoings or increase his income, but reduce his outgoings by £80 a month. That would call that as being the savings target. A number of ways he could do that. He could walk to work or not go to work at all some days. And that would call it a saving, a CIP, cost improvement program, or an efficiency. It doesn't need to spend the same for achieving the same outcome. He could work some bank shifts. That would call income generation, so he generates new money, he gets more money in. However, that would be difficult for him to maintain long term, so it's temporary, can't do that forever. We call that non-recurrent, so it's a one-off or short-term rather than regular. If he was to get another job, that would be recurrent on an ongoing basis. We get that all the time. Now, if he manages any of that, the bank manager's happy. Now, for us, that's NHS Improvement or NHS England or NHS E/I, EIEIO, but anyway. So if he manages any of that, the bank manager's very happy. If he can't, the bank manager might foreclose on his loan. Intervention, not a nice place to be. But under this, it's Tom's issue, but it's also Tom's freedom to do something about it. As the trust, we have to do the same thing. So we get each year cost pressures, we get new money coming in, we have to work out how we spend and invest in things like the holiday, etc. But we're in a position to be able to choose. Where we are right now, we've got a challenge of, we know we've got a gap between what we spend and what we earn. So just go on to the next slide, please. So what does the future look like? And it's fair to say that COVID has changed everything, not just in terms of how we're sitting today and what we're doing, how we deal with each other and how we go to meetings and how we deliver care, but it has changed everything. It will impact in terms of the public purse for a generation. Significant money has gone out. Significant money has gone out and continues to go out. We're in a situation now where it's starting to emerge what comes next and what the NHS needs to do, how it does get back in balance at some stage, and it's unclear to the letter exactly how that's going to happen nationally and what the requirement is, but we're getting some guidance and we'll brief on that in the months to come. But to summarise for us, every month we spend more than we receive by about £1 million. So we really concentrate on making the money go to where it's intended to be, looking after patients and making sure our staff are equipped to do that. But that's £1 million each and every month. We have to do something about that. New mental health investment is on the way. It's been described earlier on. That's been a delay early year, but it is coming through. We're still working through the details. We have got plans agreed with the commissioners as to how we spend that and how we improve things, how we use that to improve the situation. And it will help in terms of some funding some of the things that were already done ahead of the game. So things around crisis services and some of those mental health avoidance issues to try and help us avoid getting into situations. Money will go into there, but we still need to find significant savings. We don't want to do that to staff, we want to do that with staff. We need to find ways through this, capitalise on what I said before, and how we look at both digital and buildings to use them in different ways. A lot of money still goes into that area. We really want to protect services and the staff that work in them and provide care. And clearly, to do this, we need to transform services, do things in a very different way. And we will always, this is a constant, we need to provide more or better quality with less funding. That's the challenge of being in the public sector. It means that some of the partnership things that we talk about, can just go on to the next slide. So it's really important that we work well with others, our partners. You can always do more jointly by avoiding the transactions and the trade-offs and the fights around the barriers. We need to work with the partners. I won't labour those. These are the ones that Rasheen has already talked about earlier on. Really, we need to exploit the benefits from technology. We've seen a number of things during COVID that tell us we can work in different ways. So, never thought finance could do this, but they did all the year-end accounts completely from home. when you can't do that, can you? Well, we did really well. So you can work in very different ways. We've got to think about how we do the same outputs in different ways. We don't want to waste money or time and effort. We don't want people sat in cars driving across the city if we can avoid that. That's one obvious thing that staff have said they value. So just closing, we can go on to further information. If you do want anything, if you do want to read my life work, you can go through the annual report and account. So if you want any of this, please contact us using the contacts here if you do. Thank you very much. So I think we're into Q&A now, so I'm back. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Dave. It wasn't until you made that remark about being the mother of the board that I suddenly realised that I am actually the oldest member of the board since Barry Henley left last year. So it's obviously it's obviously time that I move on. Okay, so hopefully you have found that interesting and useful. And I'm sure there are questions coming in. So Dan, whom you can't see, is sitting looking at the screen, working out where the questions are and who they're best for. So Dan, what's the first question?
Okay, so first of all, it's from Maxwell. He's asked, how are we planning to help bank colleagues financially when they have to self-isolate due to COVID-19?
She says, and she's get the mics off the proper way.
Earrings don't work with
they
most.
don't work. They don't
I've got that too.
So thank you, Maxwell. Thank you for that. So we have had a regime of being able to support people who, you know, no matter what guise they work for us in, and so I'd be happy to make sure that you get the information that you're asking for. I don't know all the nuances of it in terms of the period of time, what level of allowance it is, but we have definitely been in a situation whereby we have agreed with partners that we want to support people who can't come to work, who have had to be in isolation.
Thank you. This one is probably for the chair. It's coming anonymously. It says, it's happened before and I'm sure it'll happen again. Some constituents will want to talk to governors from other constituencies and not their own. Will these people be turned away with the changes?
I imagine that all governors will still be happy to talk to any member of the public who speaks them. The role of our governors is not like that of, for instance, a local councillor. You know, they're not dealing with problems for people. What they're there to do is to reflect back to us, to hear from people what they think of our services, and to make sure that we hear it. And obviously, if you know somebody who's a governor but they don't live in your patch, it's still fine to get hold of them and to speak to them. And folk like our lead governor at the moment, he meets all sorts of people from all over the place. And I don't think he ever asks for their address or says you're a member of staff, don't talk to me. As I say, they're not problem solving. So I think people will still be very happy to hear and pass on, so that the board gets to hear what it feels like for people at the front line.
Thank you.
Dave, it's a fresh mask.
This next one came in from Tamar. She's asked, we have a strategy for co-production, which is a technical term that is used within the field of service user involvement as referring to power sharing and decision making. She says to achieve this, we need to employ people with lived experience roles throughout the hierarchy, including non-execs, directors, and exec directors and senior leaders, to help lead and be accountable for developing co-production. When are we planning to do this?
Well, we already do, Tamar. It's not specifically part of the person description. And there are difficulties, I think, in making that so. I remember when I was interviewed for this role, being asked why I was interested in mental health issues. And I couldn't tell them the story of my son because it wasn't my story, and it wasn't a story that he would have recognised at that stage. But there are several members of the board who, to my knowledge, are living with and caring for and helping members of their family. There are members of my board, to my knowledge, who themselves have had mental health problems. And I was not the first member of our board to lose a member of their family to suicide. So what drives people to look for those roles is very often exactly what I hear in induction from new members of staff, that they understand why mental health problems are so important because they've experienced it in their family. And you can see, if you look at our board, people who wholly understand what the issues are that face our service users and our carers, because we're living through it ourselves.
Okay, thank you. So this is a bit more of a statement than a question. This is coming on, so this is, and they've said that they agree with everything that's been said about Sue. She's a fantastic chair, a very hard act to follow, and I used to worry about the same thing happening to us that happened to mid-staffs. But I then realised with Sue, she wouldn't let that happen because you're open, honest and transparent.
Thank you. Whoever, you need to have been anonymous. I would thank you personally. Thank you.
So again, another anonymous question. How fit for purpose do you feel our organisation is for addressing institutional racism within the organisation, where clear systematic problems have been found that compromise our trust values and ultimately the services we provide? What are you doing to address this?
So I think one of the things that's really been highlighted, hasn't it, through COVID, through Black Lives Matters, through the impact of COVID on particular people with protected characteristics in particular communities, is it's really highlighted the health inequalities perspective. It's highlighted the issue about discriminatory behaviours, and it's highlighted the lack of representation of particular groups of people in our society. So I think we're part of society. So I think there is something about, and people often ask me the question about, if we're going to do something, what difference will it make if, society carries on the way it is? So we're members of society as well as members of this organisation, as well as members of the team of this organisation. So I think there's every opportunity for us to think about what we might do internally and how it can influence and impact externally as well. So I think we've been open and honest about the fact that actually this isn't an area that we've been, that anybody across society has really been competent in, and we've definitely got members of our board who are really, who are looked to as experts in this field, and who would, Joy, if she was sitting here saying, I don't have the answers. And she's been honing her expertise over many years, and that's why it's so important that we do this together, to really think about, actually, as an organisation, what do we need to do together. Now, there are some clear things that we know that we can do that can make a difference. So I said earlier that our staff survey, some of this enacts for people in how they're treated and how they experience being part of the organisation. Well, that is something that we can begin to think differently about. So, I think we're preparing ourselves to be in a place to be able to focus on some key areas that we think might make a difference. But it will only make a difference if we all work together.
Thank you. The next one's anonymous again. It says that money was earmarked by the LTP and the Community Mental Health Framework for adults and older care adults in the uplift baseline funding to CCG to bolster core community services, i.e. CMHTs. Bids are being prepared for transformational funding to improve the core offer of services. A successful bid will need to demonstrate high quality, high co-production and evidence that this uplift in baseline funding in core community services can be evidenced. What has happened to this money, and why haven't we seen evidence of this funding in bolstering and supporting our CMHTs who are desperate, who are in desperate need, waits for cares, coordinators and huge therapy waiting lists?
Okay, so if I take that, I tried to mention earlier on, the money has come out it's just been announced. It should have come out in the early year, but because of what we're doing around COVID, it's been difficult to make sure that's come out and we understand it. We're currently working through to understand with the Commissioner, the CCG, exactly how much is available and how it gets spent. Now, we haven't waited for that. We've done a number of investments previous. So a lot of the service that we've already got in. We know we need to do more. We know we need to be able to make it transformative, but we're working through that detail. So the associate directors and clinical directors and others are working hard on this in terms of both the plans and what we do about them. And there is both mental health investment standard money and transformation money. There have been a number of webinars lately to go through the detail of that. It's fair to say that the world has got knocked back by COVID, and that's caused a lot of difficulties. We are as frustrated as anybody about that. We would want to get that money and get on with it. There's no point having money unless you're using it. So we've really pushed to try and do that, working with the commissioners who are also mad keen on investing to improve. But that has been delayed, but there's a commitment to go through with it. So you should be seeing the details on that over the next few months, and it should be making a difference. Clearly, we need to understand how we measure that and understand the value. Absolutely right. There's no point just spending money for the sake of it. It's got to go where it's intended to. There was a lot talked about going into the core offering rather than some of the initiatives and the developments. It's important we safeguard those. That's well understood by both the Trust and its commissioners, and certainly the people who use the services. And we'll work hard on that.
I just wanted to add that your point about the associate directors and the clinical directors. So Elaine and Searle and Sadira, who are the leadership team or part of the leadership team in this area, have been coordinating a piece of work, and over 80 people. So some GP practices, some of our other partners, some of the third sector are involved in looking at actually what could the transformational plan look like. So that point about it's got to demonstrate it's been co-produced. It's been, that work is absolutely happening.
Thank you very much. Another anonymous question. I hear the comment made just about car use and use of technology to help efficiently work better and not want to trek across the city when not needed. Yesterday's comms email reiterated government guidelines about working from home when we can, but there does seem to be some confusion and push by managers and teams reading yesterday's email as the Trust want us more office-based. Is this the case, or just a misunderstanding, as I'm saving over 150 miles a week at present, but able to complete more work and feel much less stressed and tired?
So I'd be interested in having a conversation with whoever it is, because about the confusion we may have caused with the communication, because the communication was aimed at trying to be really clear about the fact that actually we want people to be able to work remotely and rotationally as far as is possible. So we're asking two things really. We're asking for staff who aren't working in clinical areas, who are working in professional support services, to, as far as is possible, to work from home and work remotely. And in clinical areas where it's that aren't inpatient areas, we're asking people to work on a rotational basis, so that, because we know we're keeping the balance between virtual and face-to-face interventions. So to make sure that actually we're only asking people to come in and work in situ when they really need to, or to provide a kind of a rota of staff that do that, and a rota of staff that are working remotely. So we're not asking people to start coming into the offices, and if you're being asked, then it should be clear that you're being asked because you can't do your job in a remote way, or because there's got to be a reason for you to be coming in.
This is from one of our governors, Mushtaq. He'd like to thank Sue for keeping the Trust safe for the 9 years. She's been like a guardian to our Trust, despite grieving for her son. She's showed true leadership and commitment to our values. She's not the quitter, but grittier. From Mushtaq.
Thank you, Mushtaq. And if I wasn't fulsome enough in my thanks to governors, I have to say I think we are incredibly well served by our governing body, and they are committed to the Trust. They are huge ambassadors for the Trust, but they are also pokers. I don't quite like this. But if members of our governing body spot something that they think could be better, they have no hesitation whatever in coming along and telling us, and we've all been poked by Mushtaq every now and again, quite rightly, so I thank him, and I have thoroughly enjoyed working with them all.
Okay, we've had a response from Tamar. She's like to respond to Sue today, and she says that we don't employ people in senior roles who are employed to work from a lived experience lens. It's very different, which is recognised within literature and learning in this field. As an example, I worked as a researcher and service user researcher, and the two disciplines are very different. It's very worrying if we are using the term co-production without having the understanding of what it is. Will we be employing lived experience organisational consultants who can educate our board and senior leaders on this?
So I think so. Thank you, Tamar, for coming back, and also thank you for keeping us, continually asking us this question about when are we going to improve things in this area. And I'm very aware that you've been working with Jane and others and Catherine to think about actually what does our experts by experience, our lived experience input look like in the organisation. And you have a great ambition for us in terms of where we might get to, and we're very much at the foothills, as you're aware. So the work that I know you've influenced and you're doing with them is enabling us to take some of the first steps around that.
Thank you. And that's the last of the questions we have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we will just pause for a moment. If you've listened to all of that and you would like now to ask a question, we'll give you 5 minutes or so to do that. I would reiterate that my encouragement to all of you who are watching and are interested to think about standing for one of our governor's roles, because there's going to be a substantial change to the governing body, and we want people with enthusiasm and passion for the organisation to stand, although we hope that some of our existing governors will return, because a degree of continuity is going to be really useful as well, not least because there will be some changes with the board. There will be a new chair coming in to work with them, so it will be great if the new chair has some of their experience to call on. And I would like to thank all those who passed their thanks. And somehow or other I wasn't expecting it. I'm not quite sure why. I wasn't prepared, but thank you, Rasheen, and thank you very much today. Have any further questions?
We've had another one. Yeah, another one's come in for, again, anonymous. Whilst we all recognise the current need to minimise face-to-face physical meetings, it would be very helpful if patients at home could be offered a video appointment so that their consultant, CPN, etc. can see each other. The facial view of a patient can give a guide to how they are coping.
Absolutely agree. We have the technology. Is that I don't mean to sound quick about it, but we do have the ability to do that. It is now, if you're working in a team, if the person that's put this on, you're working in a team where there's resistance to that, then please get in touch, because this is possible. This potential. We know that for some service users, they're very keen to use it. Some are a little bit more reluctant and need a little bit more support from us in order to engage in that way. But it is possible to do. So have the discussion in your team about how you can do it. If you're hitting barriers, then please get in touch.
So there's nothing.
There are no further questions coming through. So then that allows me to close the meeting much quicker than we would normally do. I do sincerely hope that next year we will be in a position to go back to face-to-face meetings, and the importance of face-to-face and seeing people face-to-face is truly, it's been remarked on several times how emotional it is just to be with colleagues, because I haven't been with Rasheen or Dave since the pandemic started. It's all been by virtually, and that's how boards are being conducted as well. Please do look out if you're interested in what we do for our board meetings becoming available for you to follow online. We've been doing them online and recording them, so the recordings of board meetings have been available. We are planning to move probably from next month to allowing anyone who wants to log on and listen to the meeting live to be able to do that. We're doing that for governors this month for the first time. So do look out for that, because we do miss the interaction that we get with people who come along to board. So if there are no further questions that have come in, I'll close the meeting and thank everyone who's there online for logging on, for their interest and their support, and we will end the meeting now. Thank you.